This is an exciting video that I think is going to help a ton of people going into the recruiting process, or if you're in the recruiting process right now. So what I decided to do not that long ago is I held an in-person college baseball recruiting summit in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I live. And what I did is I was like, okay, I'm going to go, and I spoke about the overview, the timeline of the recruiting process from a coach's standpoint, from different levels, from a player standpoint, what they should be doing. And then I thought, it's going to be even better if I can bring in some college coaches to talk specifically about what they look for. And so I was able to find some phenomenal college coaches. I have Jordan Chiero, who's going to speak in this video. I have Cole Schaffer. And then I actually also brought in somebody from compliance, Leslie Fields, who is the assistant athletics director for compliance at Xavier University. So she's going to speak on that part. So this is the way this video is going to work. For the first 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to be presenting on the overview of the recruiting process. I'm going to talk about metrics and how college coaches view metrics, talk about the timeline for each division, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is like when actually are college coaches recruiting, and it's based upon their actual level and then the timeline for your own high school age. Then Jordan Chiero is going to talk about how he goes about his own recruiting process at Wright State University, which is one of the top programs in the country, one of the most overlooked programs in the country. And then we have Cole Schaffer. Cole Schaffer is the recruiting coordinator at Ohio Dominican University, a Division II school in Columbus, Ohio. Cole talks about how he views the recruiting process as a Division II coach, what he's looking for, his own timeline, and then they both give backgrounds on their own programs. We've gotten phenomenal feedback. We held this event in Cincinnati, like I said, had almost about 70 people attend in person, and I think it went very, very well. And I know this video is going to help a ton of people. So that's the layout of this video. And then at the end, after Cole, Jordan talk, and then myself talk, Leslie Fields talks about compliance and some of the things that you got to make sure you're staying up on from that end of the spectrum. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Actually, you know what? Don't even wait to watch it. Hit the subscribe button right now, because I'm going to continue to put out a lot of different recruiting content like this on this channel. So hit the subscribe button, sit back, and I hope you enjoy this video, the College Baseball Recruiting Summit. Everybody for being here. I think with all the changes that have gone on in the college recruiting space over the last couple years, a lot of confusion, and so I figured now, especially with these new roster changes heading into 2025, and for those who don't know, at the Division I level, starting in 2025, they're having to go down to a 34-man roster, and so there's a trickle-down effect to that. We'll get into all that, but I just think putting this on, getting some college coaches so you can hear it. We have Leslie Fields here as well, and she's the assistant athletics director of compliance for Xavier. She's going to speak. Cole Schaffer, who is the Division II recruiting coordinator at Ohio Dominican, he'll be here speaking. And then we have Jordan Chiero, and he's the associate head coach at Wright State. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, and I'm going to give an overview of the recruiting process. I'll give a timeline for the different levels of coaches and when that timeline is. Just note that for all these different timelines and things I say, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be outliers. There's going to be coaches, and maybe Jordan or Cole can even get into this, but the coaches that I've talked to anyway, they'll leave a spot or two open if a player comes out of nowhere or what it may be. But this is the general framework. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Patrick Jones, and I grew up in Cincinnati. I played at Moeller High School, and then I played at Xavier University. After I got done playing, I decided to get into coaching and coached high school baseball, travel baseball, college summer league, and then was able to get into coaching at the professional level. Was a hitting coach in the Orioles organization for a couple years. And when I was in the Orioles organization, I was able to help out with the draft for each year and really fell in love with scouting, with evaluating players. And so when I got done in professional baseball and started to work with players back in Cincinnati, I wanted to incorporate recruiting into what I did just because I love the scouting and evaluation piece of it. So I think that the most important question to answer when it comes to the recruiting process is, what type of college experience do you want? Because there's a million different ways to look at the recruiting process, and there's so many different schools, it's overwhelming. And so what I mean by that is there's some players who they just want to go to the highest academic school they possibly can. They don't necessarily care about playing time or division or anything like that. They just want to go to the highest academic school. There's other players who it's like they want to maybe get drafted, or maybe that they want to go to a school where they're going to play right away, or go to a school that has a chance to win a championship. And so depending on what you want, what type of experience you want, that's going to dictate the schools that you target, where you should go, because you need to have some type of a plan, or else you're just going to be running around going from showcase to camp to camp. And then there's also kids who are like, I just want to have the college experience. I just want to have the traditional college experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually had somebody recently who couldn't decide what they wanted to do. They didn't know if they wanted to go and play Division III college baseball because they were a higher academic kid, and a lot of the higher academic kids will either go Division I or Division III. Or he didn't know if he wanted to go and just have the traditional college experience and just go to football games on Saturdays and basketball games and that type of thing. And so what I asked him, I said, well, if you're 80 years old, you're at the end of your life, and you looked back, like what would you have wanted? What advice would you give yourself? And he immediately said, like, oh, I'd tell myself to go play college baseball, because if it didn't work out, I could just transfer. And so I think looking at that from that framework of, what would you do when you were 80 years old or 10 years down the line or whatever that is, you'll cut through a lot of the social status, the social media posts, all this stuff that I think hinders our judgment in the moment. And so that's something that works for him, and it's also a good framework just in general for a lot of life decisions. So now we're talking about the recruiting timeline for coaches, all right? So we'll start off at the Power 4 level. So Power 4, that's going to be Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and ACC. And that's going to normally they'll start going and watching some players, at a few here and there, sophomore, spring. So sophomore year of high school, their spring, they'll go. They can't go to a lot because they're in season, but they'll start with the top players that sophomore, spring, and then usually that's going to end for them at the end of fall ball, junior year. As I said before, there's going to be outliers. A lot of schools will leave 1 or 2 spots open, but by and large, that's when the timeline is for them. And then that summer heading into senior year, they'll be checking on recruits. If you see players just all of a sudden decommitting, that usually means they went and checked in on recruits and they didn't really like the development or where they were at, and they ended up pulling the offer. Now, the D1 mid-majors, and just to keep this simple, when I say mid-majors, that's just all Division I's that aren't in the Power 4. All right, just to keep that, just so it's simple, because I know it's Wright State's here. Obviously, their Division I program is much higher than maybe a lot of other Division I's, but just for this segment, we'll just think of everybody that's not Power 4 mid-major. That'll start summer entering junior year, and then usually that goes through summer senior year. Now, there'll be some schools, and Jordan can even speak on how they do the recruiting at Wright State. I know they do it a little bit differently, where they're not as portal heavy as some other schools are. They recruit a lot of high school kids, but by and large, that's how it is at the mid-major level. And then D2, Cole will speak on how they do it at Ohio Dominican, but they will start normally at the Division II spring of junior year, and then go all the way until the end of fall senior year. And then lastly, at the Division III NAI and JUCO, that'll start summer entering their senior year and go all the way to spring of the senior year. These timelines are important to know, because one of the things that I see a lot of times is players, families panicking, and there's no reason to, because the timeline isn't even right yet for that particular player. So that's why I think it's important to know the timeline. One thing I forgot to mention is we are recording this whole presentation too, and we'll email that out when it's done. So if you feel like you didn't remember something or whatever, we'll email that out. So now I'm going to get into recruiting timeline for players. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are showcases. And there's PBR and Perfect Game. Those are the two big showcases. Jordan used to be the scouting director for PBR Ohio, and he'll talk about that, his experience. What I decided to do is, because I get these questions a lot of like, how many showcases should I do? When should I do them? Because it's hard to know. It really is hard to know. And then there's rankings, and then I got to improve my 60 time and this and that. So I just asked a ton of college coaches, and I just said pretty much like, hey, if you had a kid that was in high school right now, freshman, like what are we doing? Like how many showcases, when are we doing them? By and large, this was the answer that I got. This was the answer I got. Don't worry about going to any showcases until after your freshman year, okay? First one normally freshman year heading into sophomore year, and then one event heading into junior year that summer, and then lastly, fall ball junior year. So 2 to 3 showcases. It's not going to hurt you necessarily to go to more as long as you perform well, but part of the reason putting on this event is I just don't want people feeling like they got to go and do everything and anything in order to get recruited. And so by and large, that's the framework that I use. So for the freshman in high school, freshman year, you're building the skills now and developing now, and what you do now will determine the opportunities that you have down the road. I can't think of any college coach in the country that's looking at freshmen right now with the new rules that are in place. And so don't necessarily worry about the rankings or anything else. Just worry about getting as good as you possibly can. Bigger, faster, stronger, making sure your grades are in order, because that's going to open up even more opportunities for you from an academic side. So from a freshman standpoint, don't worry about much else in terms of showcases, just getting as good as you possibly can from a skills standpoint. Sophomore year, this is when I would say begin doing some research on schools, maybe start thinking about what you'd want to major in if you know what that is. Take a tour of some campuses, and then just start figuring out like what schools may align with your skill set, and maybe you go to those specific camps and whatnot. I would say at this point, sophomore year, this is when I would start getting more active on social media, posting content. And in terms of what specific content, it's a little tricky because it's different for pitchers and position players. Pitchers, they're a lot easier to evaluate. It's a lot easier to evaluate a pitcher than it is a hitter. So I'd say from a hitting standpoint, position player standpoint, in-game video is going to be king. In-game video is great, especially if you can get good angles. Just looking at video in a cage it's better than nothing for sure, but ideally in-game. And then if you're putting content out there from a pitching standpoint, if you can put a radar gun in the video and show like what the actual velo is, that's the best. Because now we're taking all the guesswork out of it, because college coaches know that everybody, we all usually add on a couple miles an hour extra than how hard we actually throw. Or 60 times a little bit better, all these things. So if we can take that guesswork out, they're much more likely to believe it and want to go see you. And I would say the last thing I'll speak on the social media part, view social media as a way as like building your job resume, because you're not going to necessarily get an offer from social media, but you may get a coach to come and actually watch you play because they find you on social media. And so view it from that lens. They're just trying to identify leads from that standpoint. Say junior year, this is when you're doing everything that we talked about freshman and sophomore year, but you're being very aggressive with emailing coaches, being proactive, and then you're continuing to put out different pieces of content, going to camps that are going to fit your skill set from an academic and athletic standpoint. And then senior year, you're continue doing the same things as junior year. Last thing is very easy to overlook the last point there. I've seen players take the foot off the gas, and before signing day, college coaches have more availability to players now. They have more options now than they've ever had before, and so you don't want to give them a reason to pull that offer. And so just making sure you're maintaining good grades and behavior is extremely important. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about, and then Jordan's going to go, is metrics. This is it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, just because that I think a lot of times we as people, we want to quantify everything. And the issue is the most important things from a position player standpoint specifically, you can't quantify. You can't quantify the mental game. You can't quantify making adjustments. You can't quantify how a hitter takes a pitch or they walk up to the plate and all these different things. And so I think, yeah, there's a baseline. Like there's no magic number. Once you hit this 60-yard dash or once you throw this mile an hour, that you now put yourself into a different category. It really doesn't work like that. These guys can get into that more specifically, but I'm going to show you an example of what I'm talking about. All right. So we got two different players up here. All right. So we got player 1 who's running a 6.52, and then player 2 he's running a 6.8. Player 1 throws 87, player 2 throws 86. So if we just looked at metrics alone, we would say in the 60 times, I mean, that's 0.3 better. We would think that player 1 is probably going to get more offers, more attention. Well, player 2 was Francisco Lindor. And both of those metrics were taken the exact same time, summer heading into their senior year. So he signed a $300 million deal, first-round pick, and then the other guy, that's the guy who's talking to you. Didn't sign a $300 million deal, okay? So point being, like I said, metrics, great, okay, great, but don't let that be the main thing that you focus on. We got to focus on playability, all right? Not just metrics, but being good at the game, being consistent. It's very, very difficult, but I think more times than not, that's why we're putting on this event. At the end, we'll have time for questions or anything on anything I talked about. Now Jordan's going to speak. And so Jordan, let me give a little background on Jordan. Jordan's the associate head coach at Wright State. He was the scouting director for Prep Baseball Report previously. So he's been able to evaluate and help players at every level, from the Power 4, mid-major, D2, D3, NAI, and JUCO. And I think what I've been able to get a glimpse of what he's going to talk about. It's going to be valuable because he's going to be able to give a perspective that only he can, because he has the experience that he has. If you're looking for more individualized one-on-one guidance when it comes to the recruiting process, which is something that I provide to only a select amount of individuals because I only have so much time, and you want to know what camps to go to, what camps shouldn't you go to, you want feedback directly from college coaches, and you want direction. This isn't a game of more exposure, because exposure without a plan is oftentimes a waste of time, because you're just going around from thing to thing to thing. But if coaches don't know who you are, they have so many other things on their mind and other players that they're watching, it's going to be hard for you to stand out. So if you're interested in getting one-on-one guidance in this recruiting process so you can get a competitive advantage on everybody else, hit the link below in the description and sign up for a free 15-minute consultation with me. So if you want more individualized attention in this recruiting process and you want someone to reach out to college coaches on your behalf, hit the link below, sign up for a free 15-minute talk with me, and let's see if we're going to be a good fit to work together. All right, let's go back to the summit. So Jordan, you ready to roll?
Because the Q&A I think is more valuable, and I promise Patrick I only talk for 15 minutes, which is hard for me. So I'm going to try to do it as quick as possible. But did you really run a 6.52?
I did.
That's it.
I cheated a little bit, but yeah.
All right. But before I go, I don't like to talk at a lot of these things. Like, you get very little time with your family as a college coach. But when guys like Coach Jones reach out, like, it's something you have to do because his passion for the game. I'm not just trying to give him his credit because he invited me to speak here, but this is one of the few things I'll do this year, just because I know how much it matters to him and helping players across the state of Ohio in his area. So anybody working with him, you're incredibly lucky to have him. So when I go through this, I'm going to give you a glimpse into what we do, and I'm going to give you a glimpse into my background because it affects how we do. And then I'm going to give you an idea of what I used to do at PBR and how it varies, because the evaluation process depends on a lot of different things. When you talk about, I've been lucky enough to do at the pro level, at the Division I level, the Division III level, So there's a lot of different variables. So I'm going to try to go through this as quick as possible, and afterwards, if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, so that's the background. Get my shadow out of the way. The only reason I put this there is because I was a Division I coach, I was a Division III coach, and then for 8 years I was out of the game. I was a hitting coordinator at the Bodome in Columbus, so I did the player development side of things, and you're going to see how that kind of lends into how we recruit. But I've been lucky enough to see it from a lot of different levels, so when we go through this, if you have any questions on the outside coaching, like when you go through, like my hitting coach says this, my high school coach says this, my summer coach says this, there's a lot of different voices in the head. So I've been lucky enough to see it from every different level, so if you have any questions on it, let me know. This is my favorite video of all time. We'll get into it in a second.
You can see how physical this team is, and anybody that wants to take big opinion or knows about Wright State and their offensive approach, they can swing the bats. This is of no surprise to anyone here. Talk about a lot of opening series or scheduled with teams that you can manhandle. This is not one of the teams that anyone has overlooked for sure. Wright State is living up to it this game.
I love that video for the obvious reason that we're beating the heck out of a top 10 team in the country. We do play them this year, so if you're videotaping this, don't send that. The thing they hit on there is they talked about the physicality of our players. Okay, so we're going to have a different recruiting model than most Division I's, and I'll get into that here in a second. But for us, when you're at the quote-unquote mid-major level, okay, there are schools ahead of you that are going to get the 6'3" polished shortstop. Like, he's going to Tennessee, he's going to Vanderbilt. So when you look at how you compete with those teams, because for us, it's not a matter of if we're going to win a regional, it's a matter of when. And I'll get into it a little bit deeper in a second, but if we just take the next best guy, and you have 35 guys on your roster, there's no way you're going to compete with those guys. So maybe there's an outlier here or there that at the time wasn't as good of a player, he develops into a better player. Sure, that can happen all the time. But for us, we have a different style of recruiting, and that video will give you a little bit of detail on how we do the things. So for us, my background's in player development. So when we recruit, what we look at is we know that each of our guys are going to get these things. Okay, so every one of our hitters is on a separate hitting plan than the next guy. If you come watch us practice, everybody's doing different things because everybody's different. And that's my background. When I was out of the game for 8 years, I was in charge of, whether it was with the Rangers or at the Bodome, I had to give pro guys a development plan to. Oh, okay, gotcha. So for different levels, so like if there's with the Rangers, my job was, okay, so look at our guys currently and which guy is tapped out, which guy has room to grow and why. Or from the scouting side of things, it's okay, so which guy right now can we get in the 15th to 20th round that actually should be taken in the top 5 rounds. Okay, so my job was to create those development plans. So when I look at a high school prospect, I look at it completely different than probably most schools do. Okay, because I look at it as, okay, what's he going to be when he's 21? Because if it's us versus Tennessee, who we might have to play in a regional, if we just go by who's better in high school, they're going to beat us. Like, that's just, it is what it is. But how do I get a guy that's going to be better than that? And the only way we do that is we're not going to play a single game this year where the other team's more athletic or the other team's more physical. So we take those guys that, what we're willing to give up a little bit in the recruiting process is maybe the hit tool. I'll get to it in a second, a little bit deeper, but we have to be able to play a different game than those guys and develop the same athlete when they're 21. That's the biggest thing, is those guys are getting freaks of nature in high school, so we have to get the same athletic potential and develop it. All right, if we don't develop, we don't win. So that's the way we look at it. If we just take the next best guy, then we're gonna win our league 75% of the time, and that's great, but that's not the goal. Like, the goal is to beat those guys. So to beat those guys, we got to do some stuff a little bit differently. So when you look at that, if you wanted to play for us, those are things you're going to have to do. And it's every single dude on our team has, when you look at that, has their own individual plan to do that. And we know who we are. Like, we get it. Like, no one's going to vacation in Fairborn, Ohio. I get that. We don't have a football team. Like, when Coach Jones talked earlier about what do you want out of this process, the college atmosphere, the football games, the frats, like, that's not us. And that turns off probably 80% of guys. But the 20% of guys that want that individual development, and not if this is sent to anybody else in Ohio, no offense, but we've won more games than any other school in the state of Ohio by a mile. We have more draft picks. And those are the things that we think, like, I'll use the word sexy. Like, Saturday football games are sexy. Like, frats, a bunch of people, some people think that's sexy. What we think is sexy is draft picks and rings. And so the guys that are drawn to that, we end up getting the right type of guy, if that makes sense. But it turns off a lot of people because it's not for everybody. So when we look at that, I hit on a little bit, the gap versus us versus quote unquote Power 4. We'll say gap, but it's not really. Like, if you look at Division I baseball right now, we got ranked this year as the 56th best program in the country, ahead of a ton of Power 4 schools. But when you say the gap, the reason that happens is kind of what I just alluded to earlier, is not just settling for the next best player and recruiting specific things and playing in a specific system. And I'll get to how this ties into the high school stuff here in a second, but we have to do things a little different than how we close that gap. So when college coaches are recruiting, I think Coach Jones alluded to it, the number 2 is a big misconception. So when you talk about metrics, the guy that has big metrics, and we all know that guy, the guy that throws 90 but can't get anybody out, or the guy that hits it 105 but he can't get a hit in the game. Like, those are guys we're trying to avoid. And in the recruiting process, it's tough because you get emails all the time. All right, this guy throws 95, cool, let's go look at it. But in reality, that doesn't play at our level. So if I'm a big guy in substance, stats, facts over opinion, last year we were 17-1 when we struck out 15% or less of our at-bats in a game. Pretty good. It's tough these days to do that because pitching's really good. And we were 15-24 when we struck out more than 15% of the time. So if you're a guy that's striking out in high school, the odds of you improving that in college aren't high. So swing and miss, or a guy that on the mound shows stuff every once in a while, those are guys we tend to steer away from, because in a 56 game season plus a playoff, those guys are kind of scratch off lottery tickets. They'll win you a game here, they'll win you a game there, but you can't build a culture, you can't build a system around those guys. And then the other thing is hit tool first. I think this is, from my times at PBR and now, the hit tool is the hardest thing to evaluate, because if you simply look at it, like, you're not facing in high school the type of pitching you're going to face in college. No matter what division it is, on a regular basis. Like, you might face a commit every now and then, but I think the last time I looked at the stat is 7% of guys that play in high school go on to play in college. So if you're facing that arm 7% of the time, you're going to face at our level every day. It's very hard to project if that's going to work. Now, you have your no-brainers, of course, but for a deeper level of recruiting, if you recruit hit tool first, there's no guarantee that's going to translate. So our style of recruiting is we recruit it last, because the other things we know are going to translate. But a guy that just bangs in high school, there's no guarantee that that's going to translate to the next level. And now with pitching the way it is, and the athletes that are on the field, it's just tough. If that's what you're going to do, is just recruit the best hitters in high school, that's not a recipe for success at the next level. And then the no chip is, for us, like, there's got to be a strong why in why you do this. Like, I'll get into this here in a second, the difference between what I do now, the difference between what I did in PBR, but one of the bigger differences now is I get to know the person I'm recruiting. At PBR, you see them at a showcase, you see them in a game, you might have a conversation here or there, but you don't get to actually know the kid. And when you look at college level recruiting, whatever bucket you fall into, if you take 100 coaches and you watch 100 players, you'll put a bucket of, hey, there's your no-brainer, like draft pick SEC guys. Then you have your Division I guys, your Division II guys, your Division III guys, and almost all those guys would agree on the talent level. But you're 16, 17 years old at the time. Like, when it really matters, you're gonna be 21. And how you progress in those 4 years, so much depends on, you're doing your own dishes, you're making your own food, you don't know half the people you're around, and you have to go to 6 a.m. lifts, you have to go to study tables, you have to do all these things, and if you don't have that inner why and it's not strong, then the guy that might have been worse than you in high school that has that, he's gonna be better than you at 21. Like, I would hope, like, when I was 17 versus 21, it's two different people. And a lot of you guys in this room, I see a lot of guys that are probably in that 15 to 17-year-old range. Like, when you're 21, depending on how you approach this game and why you play it, it's gonna be the type of player you are. Now, you get placed based on what you were at your age right now, but the guys that end up progressing are the guys that have that strong why. And so that's what I didn't have at PBR. I couldn't get inside your head, because now at my job at Wright State, I'm evaluating 10 to 17 guys right now on our board. When I was at PBR, I was evaluating 1,000. So I just couldn't have the time to go through each one of your heads to then decide on my own, like, hey, this guy's got it, this guy doesn't. So why you play this game is incredibly important, because it ends up becoming a full-time job for no guarantee you get anything. This is what, in my opinion, is gonna win. And why we've been successful is we get our guys. So we're very upfront in the process, like I just told you. No one ever is going to vacation in Fairborn, all right? We don't have a football team. If we have a frat, it's probably pretty embarrassing. I don't know. I've never seen it. But our guys come here because they want to win and they want to play professional baseball. That is what it is. And so what we do is we have what I showed you earlier, those individual plans. We take care of that when guys come in because of our backgrounds. Because I was lucky enough to do this at the pro level, I can give them those plans. And is every guy going to get drafted? No. It's just not going to happen. Do we have the most draft picks in the state of Ohio? Yeah. But how we put it in front of those guys is, you're going to come here, we're going to give you the plan, and we're going to spend every hour with you guys, every minute with you guys, to make sure you're able to reach that goal. And if that's your goal, if that's truly your goal, then you're going to be super successful with us. If you just think that sounds cool on paper, then you're going to get run out, because the rest of the guys on our team are just savages and like to make that happen. And our thought process is, if we have 35 guys that we're working individually to reach their goal, then collectively we'll reach our goal. If we have 35 fringe draft prospects, we're probably going to win a lot of games. And then what I would say from a position player and pitching standpoint, I'll get into that here a little bit more in a second, is we're going to recruit defense first, okay? Because how we're able to compete against the big boys is we have to shrink green space, meaning it's just math. If we play with more outs than the other team, we're going to win more than we lose, all right? So what I mean by that is, if we just recruit all guys that can mash but can't play defense, then you go play down and those guys, down south against those guys. Like this year we open up, we play Ole Miss, Auburn, NC State right off the bat. And if we just rely on our bats, then we're gonna get smashed, because those dudes can develop the hit tool. If you do it the other way around, just really tough to do. So I kind of hit on that here in a second. You can't, for us, we can't play the same game as Tennessee. We cannot play the same game as Vanderbilt. We cannot play the same game as Florida. And that's who we have to beat, those style of teams, to reach our goal. To win a regional, we have to beat those guys. And we can't do that just rolling out prospect for prospect. They're going to beat us. All right, so we play more of a West Coast style system, all right, where we're going to shrink the green space, we're going to run like hell on the bases, we're going to create constant chaos offensively. So from a recruiting standpoint, like, you can be the best hitter in Ohio. That's cool. If you can't run and you can't play defense, like, it's just not for us. And that might not be, I don't know how other schools in Ohio recruit, but the way we play, those are the things we focus on. So this is more of broad. I'll get off the Wright State train for a second, and I'll talk more of just general recruiting. That stuff can be developed. Like I said earlier, every single one of our guys is on an individual bat speed program, individual strength program. If you don't get stronger and you don't develop physically in college, that's on your coach. Or you just aren't playing the game for the right reasons and you don't care, all right? That stuff should be able to be developed, and it should be a priority. You can do that by getting on the right nutrition plan, the right bat speed plan, the right strength plan. That stuff should be able to be developed. This is incredibly difficult to develop. So if you're not fast, can you get faster? Yeah. Can you be an elite speed guy? Probably not. If you have swing and miss or you can't see a breaking ball, that's incredibly tough to fix. Like, are there drills you can do to get better at it? For sure. But if you're a guy that's swinging and missing in high school and can't see spin in high school, then when you get to college and that stuff gets better, there's very little evidence of anybody that's gotten better in that in college consistently, if that makes sense. Everybody in defensive ability, can you make a defender better? For sure. Can you make an elite shortstop? Probably not. So when you look at the recruiting, I think this is more broad to everybody than it is just to Wright State. Like, these are the things that we think are difficult to end up developing once you're in our program. Pitchers. What we're looking for here is, I hardly look at the radar gun when I'm recruiting. I know that's probably surprising to a lot of us in this room, but 80% of the arms at the Division I level, maybe even 85, throw 88 to 92. It is what it is. That's where they end up. 80% of the arms we scout are 88, 92. So if you can get in that range, that's where most of the guys are. Now you have your outliers that are below that. You have your outliers that are above that. And I know that you might think it's different because every time you look on social media, someone's throwing 100. I promise you, I scouted 300 pitchers last year. Very few throw over 92 miles an hour. Like, you'll face, like, we played Oklahoma last year. They had 3 or 4 guys that were 95, 97. We have a couple guys on our team that are 95, 97. But in reality, the general 80% of Division I pitchers are going to be 88, 92. So what we look at is, can you get to that? Like, if you're 84, 86 right now, like, if other guy's 87, 89, that doesn't mean he's better than you. It's, once again, 16 versus 21. Like, when you're 21, what are you going to be? And so we look more at the athlete, the movement patterns. Can he get into that 88, 92 range? And then the other stuff is what wins games. Like, velocity doesn't win games, even if you are 88, 92. You throw 88, 92 and you don't have advanced secondary, you can't pitch, and you're soft on the mound, our guys are going to absolutely destroy you. We're going to just, it's going to be like batting practice, all right? And that's what most Division I teams will do. But if you're 88, 92 and you have an advanced secondary pitch and you can move the ball around the zone, your fastball has a unique profile to it, and you're a competitor out there, like, you don't need to throw harder than that. You don't, because those are the things that matter. I mean, if you up and you throw 97, you don't have anything else to beat us, by the second inning, our guys are going to be teeing off on that. But it's the other stuff that actually wins baseball games. But to a certain extent, it's, do you have the potential to throw that hard? Not do you throw that hard right now, and do you have the ability to locate secondary? Do you have the ability to be unique? Because if you're just that stock right-handed pitcher that's 88, 92, average breaking ball, like you're gonna get feasted on at the next level. I'm gonna try to go through this faster. Velocity, we can develop that. Command, secondary, mentality, very tough to develop. Very tough to develop. All right, more of the general stuff, the transfer portal. For us, it's filling pieces versus the main thing. Now, it's very different. At the higher, at quote unquote higher levels, those guys are gonna lean towards transfer portal guys because they have to win like right now. Like when those guys are flipping and money's getting thrown around, like you're gonna see like your SEC, ACC guys, they'll be more transfer portal heavy than schools, I guess, like us that are more development heavy. Because at the end of the day, it's just, there's less guessing. Like you can take a guy that already has a track record in college and you can plug and play and kind of have an idea what it's gonna look like, all right? But the con for me and why I don't like the transfer portal at all for position players. As a matter of fact, I hate it. Like, the only way we'll use it is if a guy gets drafted that we weren't planning on or a guy leaves that we weren't planning on. And we don't have something to fill that. Because we're so culture and system driven that if you just plug a piece into that, that's not going to produce the results as if a guy that we had in our system for 3 or 4 years. Like, earlier I told you play a different style of game. You're not gonna learn that in 3 months. And I don't have the relationship with some guy on a spreadsheet that's supposedly good, that a guy I recruited at 16, that I know how his heart beats, I know what he's done with me, I know how hard he's worked, like I hate it. Now pitching is a little different, because if you lose a guy, pitching is easier to plug and play. But from a positions player standpoint, like we haven't since I've been there, other than one guy, we had a guy, and he wasn't even a portal, he was a JUCO guy, but when I was at the Bonum, I trained him since he was 11. He was a Louisville transfer. I know him. He came in, he's a part of it, but we're such a tight-knit culture, like system-driven group that we don't like to use it. Now, other schools use it all the time. So it just depends on what school you're talking to. But in general, the pros of the transfer portal are, you know what you're getting. You know, because there's college evidence on what they've done. For me, the cons outweigh the pros because you don't have development time and they're not going to fit into our system. Rule change. So anybody that has told you they know when it's happening, please have them talk to me because I don't know. We've heard back and forth. Anything with your mid-majors, you may get a bump here or there, but it's going to be a lot of league stuff that happens. Because, for example, our league, say we wanted to go to 20, and then another team in our league's like, we can't afford that. We can only go to 13. Like, so they're gonna police it that way. Is how I think it's gonna happen. But there's not gonna be a team in the country that has 34 scholarships. And when it's gonna happen, I don't know. You have to prepare for it as a coach. I wish we had more information, but it's up to people that are in courtrooms and they're gonna decide it. But the biggest thing that's gonna matter is when colleges have to have their roster turned in by. So what I mean by that is when you bring these kids into campus and when you're looking to, if you pay attention to anything I say, make sure you pay attention to this, is when you look at schools, if they have to have their roster turned in by the fall, then this rule is going to be great for the high school player. It's going to change everything because you have schools out there that can bring in 70 guys right now, and then what you're seeing on Twitter right now, just cut those guys at the break. And if that rule doesn't change, then they're going to continue to do that no matter what the roster is. But if they're allowed right now, like if we don't have to turn our roster until 24 hours before our first game. And it's not going to change anything for us because last year we could have had 40 guys, we had 38. So we don't over recruit, we never will. My thought process on this is if we spend all this time and energy and resources into recruiting you and then you didn't work out, that's on us. Like we made the decision to bring you in. So now it's development time, man. If you're not where you're supposed to be, then we're going to grind with you, work with you. And then if you want to leave because you don't think you're going to play in a year or two, fine. But we're never going to cut a guy because of that, because ultimately it was our decision. But other schools do it differently. You have some schools, I'm not going to mention any, they have separate locker rooms because they bring in 70 guys. But if that rule stays in where they can cut guys before the first game or in December, then nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same thing. And I would just say, do your homework on those schools. You can see it. It's on Twitter. You see everybody that says, when anybody says, I've decided to enter the transfer portal right now, just letting you know they got cut. They didn't decide to do that. All right, they got cut. So, but if it's at this timing, then nothing's going to change. Those schools will continue to bring in 70 guys. They'll keep doing what they're going to do, but then they're going to have to be a lot more careful on who they end up bringing in. All right, but when you look at does PBR a perfect game matter, I think absolutely it does, because from a college coach's standpoint, I don't think you need to go to 1,000 showcases. But what is incredibly valuable for us is those verified statistics. And then in Ohio, at least, like I can speak, like I trust the guy that took my job, Kyle Weldon. Like I trust him. So like I can call him and say like, hey, we need this, this, and this, and he can give me your name, regardless of your rank. Where you're ranked truly doesn't matter, because it's an impossible job. You don't have enough information to do it incredibly accurately. Now, I tried my absolute best. I spent way more hours than I probably should doing it, but it's almost impossible. So what's the value of the rankings is having your name on that list, because myself, Coach Schaffer, will go through that list and we'll look at guys, because I know that Kyle Weldon has a general feel of who can play baseball, but then we'll make our own decision off that. So my advice from a showcase standpoint is really similar to what Coach Jones said, is make sure you're ready to showcase, then go. And then if financially it fits, go to one a year, because then the coaches can see your progression. But it's an identifying tool. It's not the end all be all when it comes to recruiting. Like I'll never look at a guy and be like, oh shoot, I really wanted to offer that guy, but he's 25th and this other guy's 17th. Like that'll never happen. But it's a good evaluation tool, and it gives you third-party measurables, video that you can look at, because no matter who you talk to, when you're talking to summer coaches, high school coaches, they all have a dog in the fight, right? There's some you trust more than others, but they want you to be successful, which is why they're good at their job. So it's tough to, I'm gonna make sure I say this the right way. It's hard to trust everything you hear. I'll just put it that way. So getting a third-party source that doesn't have a dog in the fight, it's easy for us to then evaluate off of that and then take everything else that we've used in the evaluation process. All right, last thing, and I promise I'm done. All right, is this I lied earlier. If you were to take anything I took from today, this would be it, is every player in this room, you're gonna have so much, this process is the most crazy, you feel like you don't have any control over it. The only thing you can control is you versus you. Like, you can choose to be better than you were the day before, all right? And just having a strong work ethic isn't good enough, because if you have just determination with no direction, you're not gonna get anywhere, all right? The key is using people you trust and having an actual plan and direction. And what I mean by that is, like, if you look, I'm gonna show you guys some things I would prioritize if I were you, but if you're just like, I need to get faster, okay? And everyone's, your coach is like, oh, you need to get faster. All right, then you go run hill sprints and you're like, all right, I think I'm getting faster. But you have no idea. Like you just doing it on your own isn't gonna do anything for you. You need an expert in each of these fields to surround yourself with, that you can set up a plan, all right? So the first thing I would do is I would have a mentor if I'm you guys. Talking to you guys, any other of these high school guys in here, like get a guy that's playing college baseball right now, because they're going through it, that played at your high school, that played in your summer program, and say, all right, here's where I'm at. What would you do if I'm you? Get advice from him. Someone you trust, someone that's doing things the right way, someone that you look at him and you're like, that's the guy I want to be. Like, that's what I want to work like. That's where I want to play. Like, that dude does it the right way, and get his advice. That'd be number one. Hands down, get that dude. Surround yourself with him. Talk to him as much as he'll let you talk to him. The other thing I would do is I would hire a strength and nutrition coach. Immediately, and you're talking to someone, you see offensive development, it's the last thing. I made a living doing that for 8 years. So I'm telling you right now, that for me is important, but it's at the very bottom of what I would do. And as parents, what I would spend money on. And I'm not saying don't do it, because if you have a good one, that's really important. But that's a separator, the strength and nutrition. It's a natural performance enhancer. Like, every single one of our guys is on an individualized nutrition plan, a sleep plan. And when you look at the general things high school guys do, like if I ask every single one of you guys sitting here, when's the last time you hit? Everyone would probably say today. Or when's the last time you fielded ground balls? Oh, in the past week. If I ask anybody in here how many calories they've eaten today, how many grams of protein they've had, what their quality of sleep was last night, the number of people that could answer that question is going to go way down. Okay, so if you're looking at opportunity to get ahead of your peers, that's step one. Like, because not many people are doing that. And so if you get an expert around you that can teach you how to do those things at an early age, which one do you trust to do your recruiting? But then have them reach out for you based on the schools. Now, you need someone that's going to be honest with you too. Like, because if you say, what's your dream schools? Like, half of you guys in here are going to have Vandy, Florida State, like, because everyone wants to play there. But you have to have someone that's willing to tell you, like, hey, probably not there right now. This is more realistic. Let's reach out to those guys. And so at the end of the day, a coach reaching out is way more valuable than you reaching out. I don't think you sending emails to colleges hurts, but I get 200 a day. And it's just tough. Versus if a coach calls me and I trust him, that holds so much more weight than just an email. So get someone that you're in charge. Hey, this is my recruiting guy. Like, someone you trust, someone has a good relationship with college coaches, that guy be a great resource. If you can, and guys that be honest with you, hey, here's where you can play right now, here's who I'm willing to reach out to, because that holds a lot more weight. Friends, like your teammates, even though they want the best for you, like when we talk about what we're gonna do, it's no one in this locker room truly knows what we're going through. Like, it's just us. And no one outside you and your parents know what this recruiting process is like for you. So you pick the 4 to 5 people that I just outlined that can guide you the best way, and everybody else, who cares? Limit the noise that's around you, because nothing else matters. Like, you pick each an expert in all those fields, and you trust them to develop you in those fields, and then whoever says anything else doesn't mean anything. But I would say make sure everybody inside that inner circle is on the same page, because you don't want to go to your high school coach and be like, hey, sorry, my hitting coach said this, or my strength coach said that. So I would just sit down with whoever decides your playing time, be like, hey, I chose this guy for this, this, and this. Do you have a problem with that? Or do you trust those guys? And if they say, yeah, go for it, go for it. Now, understand who writes your name in the lineup too. So don't just completely, I mean, your high school coach is probably a great resource. He's probably one of those guys. But in general, make sure your inner circle is on the same page. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm trying to do. Hey, Patrick, you're my hitting coach. Jordan, you're my strength coach. Coach Schaffer, you're my mentor. Here's what I'm trying to do. Put you guys on the same page. And then you have a team working for you to help you do that. Because at the end of the day, all this recruiting stuff's awesome. You're going to learn incredible resources. But at the end of the day, it's you versus you. If you're not good enough, it doesn't matter who you have in your corner. And if it doesn't matter to you enough, then it doesn't matter who you have in your corner, because they can get you someplace. But at the end of the day, you're going to put on a field in a program with 35 grown men that you're trying to take their job. And if you're not serious about it and you don't know what you're doing, then you're not going to have a chance anyways, even if you use these resources to get to a place you probably shouldn't be. So I'll be open for the Q&A. I don't know how long over I went. I apologize. Thank you guys for having me.
Life between your family life and everything that's important to you. So when you do go into, we'll call it the non-championship season, which for baseball is the fall, obviously, there's restrictions placed on you for what you can do and how many hours you can do that stuff. So at our level, at the Division II level, when we first get back to campus, we're going to jump into individual sessions, and that's 8 hours a week. So typically that's going to be 3 hitting groups, 2 defensive groups, and then you're going to lift 4 times that week. When we get into the team setting, things change a little bit. We're allowed to open it up to 15 hours, which typically means we're just practicing every day, and we usually give our guys the weekends off in the fall. So where the D2 lifestyle kind of plays into that, we want you to continue to be a huge part of your family, continue to be active in your friendships, or if you got a girlfriend, make sure you're holding up your end of the bargain on that side of stuff as well. So the Division II lifestyle is really all-encompassing. There's no doubt that Columbus is a great place to live. There's a lot of stuff to do in Columbus, and we want all of our guys to enjoy those things. I'm not from Ohio. I know everybody from Ohio are crazy big Ohio State fans, and we're really close to there. And guys like to go watch football games. So we're going to give them the opportunity in the fall to go watch football games, and there's a lot of give and take on that side of stuff for us. We're going to give you the opportunity to go be a college kid in the fall. We're going to give you the opportunity to go home on the weekends, or if you live close, go home at night and have dinner with your parents. When you come back in the spring, we play a 50-game schedule. We're expecting you to be locked in, ready to go every day, whether it's practice, lifting, games, or whatever it is. Okay? And I think that we've found a lot of success in sort of meeting guys in the middle, but also with the understanding that, you know, baseball at Ohio Dominican is a very big priority because we're here to win baseball games. And then beyond that, you know, we need to get you a degree and get you out of here in 4 years so you can go off and be successful doing something else. So the 4-year relationship that will impact the next 40 years of your life. When we bring a kid in, a lot like what Coach just talked about, when we bring a kid in, our expectation is that kid's going to be with us for 4 years. Right? We haven't cut somebody from the program. My boss has not cut somebody as the head coach in 9 years. So with that comes the understanding that when you come to college, you're an 18-year-old kid, you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. But understanding that we're going to have a chance to respond to that, whatever that is. If you go off and get arrested, it's a different story. But fortunately, we haven't been in that situation. But we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, the experiences we're providing for you at our school specifically, and again, this ties into the Division II lifestyle, that you enjoyed your experience so much with us in the 4 years that you're at Ohio Dominican, that's going to set you up for success in the next 40 years of life. So that can mean with your degree, with the connections that you've made through the school, with your internship, with your teammates, but also having a great time playing baseball with your best friends and winning a bunch of games. So really what we're trying to chase as a coaching staff is how can we make, and kind of what we do. Again, we're not an SEC program, so there's a lot of things that maybe we don't have that you're going to find at another school. And at least for us, it hasn't been necessary, and I think that there's some proof behind that. So when we're talking about hitting, and to get onto the recruiting side a little bit, obviously the metrics and things that you're going to see on prep baseball, that's all stuff that we check out as well. I think that there's I think if someone tells you they're not looking at that stuff, they're probably lying. It is certainly not the end-all be-all, but it at least does give you a starting point of kind of what you're working with, or at least an outline. So when we're doing our hitting stuff with our guys, specifically when we come back in January, ready to go after Christmas break, we've got an indoor facility with 3 cages and we've got 2 machines. So if you do the math on that, it means someone's going to be throwing in the 3rd cage. But really what we do is we're trying to put you in the most challenging environment that we can day in and day out. Right? So with that comes a lot of failure in what we do. And when there's a lot of failure in a situation like that, I think that the biggest question for the younger guys in our program that maybe haven't been challenged or pushed like this before, on the offensive side, is if there's no success to be had in this setting, then how are you even gauging success? What is success to you? And for us, it's just as simple as, were you on time and did you make the right swing decision? If you can say yes to both those things, then for us, that's a successful rep. The outcome of what you're trying to do, that's out of your control. So I think that has really allowed us to focus on the things that are right in front of us and what we can control. So the way we train the hitters, especially in the off season, can be very aggressive. but I do think it's necessary. So very aggressive with high intent, which means lots of velocity, lots of spin, and we're never going to show guys the same thing 2 days in a row. Okay, so if we're doing a straight on, velo fastball in one cage the next day, that's probably going to bump over to an angle, or we're going to drop it down to the floor. We're going to do something different every day, so we don't let your body get too comfortable. And like I mentioned, dealing and tolerating with failure in a training setting. A training setting is not truly a training setting unless you're pushing yourself to a point where you're starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's where you're going to make your strides. So on the offensive side for us, there's going to be some swing and miss in the cage. There's going to be some guys fouling balls back in the cage. There's going to be some guys rolling over on stuff in the cage. You're going to see everything, and we would consider that an unsuccessful rep. As people that like to have success in the game, hit balls hard and catch barrels, that would be unsuccessful. But based on how we measure success, as long as you can check those two boxes, we're going to be in good shape. But tolerating and dealing with failure, those are two different things. Tolerating failure probably implies a little bit of complacency. Complacency is not going to be good for you in any aspect of life, whether it's baseball or not. But being able to deal with your failure and process your failure and understand that baseball is a game that is completely designed around how little you're going to fail. So you are going to fail, and you're going to fail more in high school or more in college than you did in high school. That's just the nature of the game. So us putting guys in a pretty consistent setting like this, you can really see the cream rise to the top. There's a lot of guys that have only had success in high school, and they don't deal with failure very well. There's some guys that maybe had success in high school, but they understand how to process failure a little bit. And usually those are the guys that end up having more success. But truthfully, you're never going to get to that point in your baseball experience unless you are pushing yourself to a point where you are creating a little bit of failure. And then the importance of resiliency, and I think resiliency is a big characteristic of what we look for, especially on the offensive side with our group. And then what we do on the training side with the hitters, I do believe that develops a lot of resiliency in our guys. If you look back at our schedule from last year, there's probably 3 or 4 games that we were down in the 9th inning and we came back and won. Because the group is resilient. They understand what we went through. They understand how to deal with their failure leading up to that. And they're able to be resilient and tough enough, and the game's not over until that last out's recorded. And that's a really, really big characteristic or trait of teams that win a lot of baseball games. All right, there's so many teams that maybe the culture's not great, or maybe it's just a bad core group of guys and you're just not winning a lot of games. You're going to see a lot of those teams roll over towards the end because they just don't have the resiliency, they don't have the toughness to pick themselves up off the mat and keep going. We'll get into the infield development side a little bit and kind of what we value. And again, this is different with every program. What doesn't matter if it's on the pitching side, the defense side, the hitting side, it doesn't matter. Every program is going to value something different, right? So when we're recruiting a guy, defensively, again, a lot like what they do at Wright State, defense is at a premium for us. We need to play good defense above anything else. We've been really fortunate to have a lot of really good defenders in our program behind the plate in the infield and in the outfield, which is a big reason why we've had a successful program for a long, long time. But we can really boil this stuff down to the fundamentals of what we're expecting you to look like when you do come to us, because everybody's going to come with something different. Everybody comes from a different background. You've been raised by different people. You've played in different programs. You've trained in different programs. Everybody does things differently. So when we're recruiting guys, we like to look and look what you are right now and see how well you're going to fit into our mold when you get with us. So just kind of a really elementary look into what we do and what we value. For us, it starts with catch play, especially as an infielder. You're going to make a lot of throws in a game, and I think that something that is very easy to blow by, whether it's practice or before a game, is just how seriously you're taking the catch play element of your game. It's really, really easy to roll out there and just make 15 throws until you feel warm and then shut it down and come back into the dugout. And then on the flip side of it, we all play baseball here in Ohio and early in the spring, and it's not very warm out. Is going and throwing before a game, 30 minutes before a game when it's 40 degrees out, really going to get you that warmed up? No, it's truthfully probably not. But what we try to create with our guys in every aspect of our program is some type of routine. So that can be in the weight room, that can be on the offensive side, the pitching side, or in this instance, the defensive side. We're always going to start with our detailed catch play routine. And over the course of that catch play routine, we print it out and give it to the guys, and we make them keep it in their pocket and bring it to the field with them every day until they know it by heart. But it's basically putting you in any type of footwork, body position, arm slot, you name it. Whatever you can possibly be put in in the game as an infielder, you're going to throw from that over the course of your catch play. So if we're mindful of those things and we take stuff like that seriously, then usually that cleans up a lot of things on the back end. So catch play is really important. Pre-pitch is really important to us, and pre-pitch is essentially just a prep step. Seems very small, seems like a really small timing part of the game, but it is something that we value a lot. So we harp on that with our guys a lot too. We'll line guys up on the back edge of the infield and we'll just hit fungos or put balls in the machine. Purely for the purpose of getting them comfortable with pre-pitching or doing their prep step when we want them to do their prep step. So really when it gets to the point of it looks a little robotic, that's kind of when we know we're in a good place because everybody's on the same page. And then posture. Posture is a big thing for us, especially in the infield. You're going to see a lot of guys that just like to play really high off the ground. Maybe their feet aren't as quick as they need to be, and maybe their hands aren't as good. But a lot of times, especially at the high school level, you can make up for bad feet with good hands. When you get to the college level, everything speeds up a little bit, and that's just not possible anymore. So when we're putting this whole thing together and looking at the infield side of things as a big picture, it's starting with our pre-pitch, and then that leads into our posture, and then everything else that you're going to see beyond that. And then as far as tracking the development of our infield guys, I brought our infield coach with us. He's right there. He was a 5-year shortstop for us. And I kind of tasked him with taking on the development side of our infield as far as charting and doing whatever that we're going to do. And this was a new thing for us this year. He did a great job with it. Made it much easier for us to be able to figure out where some of our deficiencies were as an individual, but also as a team, and tailor our development program towards that, which is essentially just charting our infield efficiency. So basically what that's going to cover is any direction you're possibly going to move, back right, back left, right, front left, front. It's going to go hop type, it's going to go throw type, it's going to go throw success, field success, all of these things where it really allows us to boil things down for every guy as an individual and tailor a specific development program for them. And then on to the recruiting side, really what we came for, so I apologize for rambling. What do we look for in a position player? So what we look for in a position player, there's going to be some differences in what Wright State or another Division I school is looking for. Because the reality is, at our level, guys are there for a reason, and it's because they're not Division I baseball players, and that's completely okay. So when we're looking for guys, we want physical guys. There's no doubt about it. Everybody wants physical guys. But I think for us it's also important to look for physical guys where there's still room to grow. I think the weight room is far more prevalent now for high school guys than what it was when I was in high school, and I'm sure when these guys were in high school. So I think kids are bigger, faster, stronger now maybe than they've ever been. But I think that you also get to a point where maybe you're just developing a little bit too quick than what your body's ready to handle, and I think that can potentially lead to some injuries down the line. And we see it with some of our guys right now. We have a couple guys that came onto campus this fall, and they had some arm problems, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different reasons for it. But I think physicality with room to grow is really important for us. There's not a cookie cutter way or a mold or a specific type of body type that we're looking for. It's just making sure that we're finding guys that are going to fit into our program well. Really good actions, really good movements, that all falls under the umbrella of just being a good athlete. For us, there's a lot of different ways to identify that stuff. We love recruiting high school football players. Doesn't mean that you can't play for us if you didn't play high school football, but we love guys that play high school football. There's just a little bit of a different mentality for that, a little bit different competitiveness, and we love to get out and watch those guys play. And then, like I mentioned, provide value on defense. We need to recruit defense first. Defense is what wins baseball games. We're always going to hit well enough, I believe that. ODU's always been a very offensive program. We're always going to hit. There's always going to be good hitters there, so we need to make sure we're taking care of business on defense so that we can win games. And again, what we look for is going to be different than what Wright State or maybe a different program looks for. Because again, the caliber of athlete we're getting out of high school, it might just look a little bit different than what they're getting. So pitchability, the ability to just throw strikes, fill up the zone, and making sure we're not putting guys on base and giving up free stuff. That's a really, really important part of the game, and I think especially now with social media and everything, all of these good things, I think we can start to lose sight of just how important pitchability and being able to compete in a game is. And then on top of that is projectability. Just like he said, you want to look at a 17-year-old kid and have a pretty good idea in your mind of what he's going to look like when he's 21 years old. It's not exactly a science, but if you do it long enough, you have a pretty good idea of what these guys look like. And truthfully, when we're recruiting guys, if we have the ability to compare this person to a good player in our program right now, he's got a lot of the same attributes or the same traits as this guy did 4 years ago. Makes it a lot easier for us to take a chance on a kid. But projectability is a big part of it, and there's a lot of things on the makeup side that can go into that as well. If a guy's an overachiever, a big-time competitor, those are all things that fuel projectability as well. Really good command of 2 or more pitches. 2 pitches doesn't seem like a lot, but if you can truly command 2 pitches and throw them in any count, you're going to get people out. There's no doubt about it. And I think something that you'd see in a difference from high school to college, it doesn't matter what level it is. If you throw a flat 90-mile-an-hour fastball and that's all you throw, you're going to get hit around. And it doesn't matter if it's Division I, II, III, NAI, or JUCO. You're going to get hit around. So the ability to command 2 pitches, be able to throw them in every count, and be comfortable with that is really important for what we're looking for on the pitching side of things, because we can always play around with developing an extra pitch. And then routine-oriented players. This is not just specifically on the pitching side. It can be with everything. But a lot of what we try to do, whether it's baseball or academics or anything else, is to get guys comfortable in a routine. So a lot of guys are going to come in with their own routine, and that's completely okay. We're going to give them a routine that they're going to need to jump on board with, otherwise they just won't make it, and that's the reality of things. But the truth is that successful people in life, it doesn't matter if it's baseball, business, or whatever you decide to do, people that are routine oriented are the people that typically are successful. So we do that with study tables. We do that with lifting routines or making sure we're doing X, Y, and Z before we start anything. It's all about having a good routine for yourself. And when we're getting to know a kid in the recruiting process, we ask a lot of questions about the routine that they're on. Whether that's throwing, whether that's lifting, or whatever it is, we want to get a better understanding of how they're going to fit into things with us. So this is going to be the Division II side of recruiting as far as scholarships and everything like that goes. So the NCAA says for baseball, a Division II school is allowed to have up to 9 scholarships. You're allowed to have a maximum of 9 scholarships. We've got about 2.5 scholarships. So there's nothing that says you have to have 9 scholarships. They just can't give you more than 9 scholarships. And a lot of schools at our level are probably going to fall into sort of that region we're at, around the 2.5, 3, maybe 4 scholarships. Very rarely are you going to deal with a Division II program that's going to be fully funded, which is 9 scholarships. And then roster size, again, it changes everywhere you go. We've always carried 45 to 50 guys. Kind of depending on the size of that roster, we'll play JV games if it's up towards 50. But usually, with 45 to 50 guys in the program, it gives us the opportunity to travel with everybody. And that can be a midweek, that can be on a spring break trip or wherever we're going. A big part of what we do is very family oriented. We want to make sure that we do everything together. So that means lifting, going to practice, traveling to games, doing whatever it is, eating dinner, it doesn't matter. We're a family, we need to do everything together. And then our walk-on to scholarship player ratio. There's guys that we bring in on scholarship. Most of the guys that we bring in are not on scholarship. And because our money situation is the way it is, it's not an excuse, that's just the reality of our situation. A lot of our guys come in on no money, and they have the opportunity to play themselves on no money. But what really is good for our guys and what we can get them to kind of sweeten the deal a little bit to come to school is always going to be the academic side of things and the scholarship money that's available there. So for example, a scholarship size that we might offer on the baseball side might be like $2,000. If you have a 3.0 GPA, they're probably going to give you $18,000 in academic money. So we rely heavily on the academic side of stuff to help take care of some of the costs of the school. And if there's the ability to throw some baseball money on top of that, then we'll do it. But the reality is probably well over half of the guys on our roster are not on any money at all. But they all have the opportunity to play themselves onto money. Transfers, again, anybody you're talking to, if it's a college coach, I think it's important to kind of ask the question about the transfer portal because everybody does handle it a little bit differently. So how we utilize the portal, at least in recent time, all of the guys that we have gotten out of the transfer portal are guys that we offered initially out of high school. So we've got 3 on our roster right now. One came from Oakland, one came from Cincinnati, one came from Kentucky Wesleyan, and he was a grad transfer. But all of these guys that we've brought in as transfers later on in their career, these are all guys that we've established a relationship with in their high school recruiting process. So that relationship was already there. They get in the portal, they reach out to us. We already know the kid. It's a lot easier for us to bring somebody in like that. Because again, what we try to do is very family oriented. We try to keep everybody together, and if you're bringing somebody in purely based off numbers that you see on social media or on a spreadsheet or somebody's website, you can't truly be putting yourself in the right position and doing right by everybody else in the program without getting to know them. So when we bring guys in, we get to know them over the course of their high school recruiting process. As far as junior college transfers go, we're not super heavy on that side of stuff. It's basically as needed, which for us is typically going to be on the mound on the junior college side. We've probably only brought in 2 junior college guys in the last couple. It's pretty different than a lot of other conferences do it. So if we lose a kid in the transfer portal, it will never be to a school in the GMAC. You are not allowed to transfer within or from school to school in the GMAC. So if we're having kids transfer out, more often than not, those kids are going to go up to the next level, go up to a Division I school. But you cannot make a lateral move within the GMAC. And then do ODU players use the portal, and how do we handle it? So in the last probably 3 years, we've had guys use the portal. Guys have gone to Kentucky, Dallas Baptist, Wright State, Bowling Green, kind of all over. And typically how we handle that is, you know, if we want everybody to stay for 4 years. When you sign with us, that's a 4-year commitment to the program. If guys have developed to the point where they've earned themselves the opportunity to go to the next level, you know, we obviously can't say no. So we're gonna wish them the best and send them on their way. And those guys usually go on to have a lot of success. And typically, if a guy expresses interest in getting into the portal, and they just want to feel it out, usually for us, and I think a lot of programs would echo the same sentiment, if you want to get into the portal, that's fine, you can get into the portal, but you can't come back here. I think there's a big loyalty side of things when you do talk about the transfer portal, and for us, we want to make sure that everybody we bring into our program is 100% committed to being with us. So if somebody is interested in testing the waters in the transfer portal, 100% okay, no hard feelings, but you're going to have to find somewhere else to go play. And then just my advice wrapping up, and I think the biggest thing I'm going to talk about here, and Patrick and I have talked about it a little bit, is just the importance of being a tremendous communicator, especially as someone who's trying to get recruited. I think probably to a fault, a lot of guys that do the recruiting coordinator job are probably over communicators by nature. And I think what we've seen a lot, especially in the last couple of years of the new generation has started to come up and get recruited, is a lot of guys just don't want to communicate. A lot of guys prefer to handle things over text messages, and they just don't get back to you very quickly, or whatever it is. But the most important thing that you can do for yourself when you're getting recruited, whether you want to go to that school or you don't want to go to that school, is to be a good communicator with the person that is expressing interest in you. And communication goes a long way, and it goes a lot farther than just the recruiting process. When you do get to campus, you're expected to communicate with the coaching staff. You're expected to communicate with your teammates. The guys that shut themselves off and really aren't willing to communicate are typically the guys in any program that just don't make it. So I can't stress enough just how important communicating is. And again, not just to the college baseball side of things, but to life in general. And then surrounding yourself with really high achievers. I think one of the worst things you can have in your life is being surrounded by complacent people that are just okay where everything's at, and that's how it's going to be. Especially if you're somebody that's trying to do better every day at whatever it is that you do. So surrounding yourself with really high achievers is something that's going to be really important to you. And sometimes you have to seek those people out. Sometimes maybe you don't know those people in your life right now, but there's always going to be people out there that are looking for people to make them better. Those are the high achievers you need to surround yourself with. Don't be afraid to ask any questions about the recruiting process. Again, this is a really stressful time in your life. I get it, and we kind of gone through the timeline a little bit of how every division does it a little bit differently. If you have any questions about NAI, I'd be happy to offer some insight there as well, because they just depends on where you're at in the country. Everybody does it differently. But again, it's a really unique process, and in a lot of ways, depending on the school, the recruiting process has changed a lot in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of things that maybe you thought you knew from the past that maybe have changed. It's important to ask questions like that, because when we bring kids onto campus, there's always questions about the recruiting process or timelines or whatever it is. It's better to have that knowledge and move forward with it than not know it at all. And then I think maybe one of the most important things, if you're interested in playing college baseball, if you want to play college baseball, you've got planned for college baseball in your future, you need to watch college baseball. Because the reality is that it's just a different game. You're going to see the physical side of it. You're going to see the execution side of it. You're going to see the game planning side of it, and everything that goes in to winning a college baseball game, running a successful program, or whatever it is. Being able to learn that side of the game is going to be really important. I've already said how I think kids are bigger, faster, stronger now maybe than they've ever been before. There's no doubt about it. Guys are swinging the bat harder. Guys are throwing baseballs harder and doing all of these the measurable things better than they've ever done them before. But I think there's one thing that is keeping younger guys back, and it's that they're better at the sport and they're worse at the game. So I think a lot of baseball isn't necessarily just about X's and O's, going out, throwing strikes, putting the ball in play, and running the bases. I think there's a lot of baseball IQ, strategy, a lot of these things that go into the game that can lead you to be successful when you are playing in the game, that I think is kind of gotten lost in the last 10 to 15 years of seeing guys come through. So I would encourage you to watch as much college baseball specifically as you can. One, it's great to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's great baseball, but you're also going to learn a lot, because the game at college is significantly different than what it is at high school. And then making the weight room a priority. Always going to be a good thing. Again, I'll say it one more time. Guys are bigger, faster, stronger now than they've ever been before. But it's important to make sure that the weight room is a priority for you, because if it's not now, it will be when you go to college. Otherwise, you just won't make it. So you're going to have to settle into that routine at some point. It's better to do it early, get comfortable with it, get familiar with everything that you're going to do. It's a little bit of a more seamless transition when you do go to college. And then as far as the recruiting thing, I'll wrap up with this. I think the most important piece of advice I was ever given as a player was to go where you're wanted, not where you want to go. Right? I think everybody has big aspirations of, whatever school it is, name big school. Everybody wants to go there. Everybody wants to play there. The reality is that depending on when this rule change happens, there's only 34 guys in the entire country that can play there. So everybody wants to play there, but it's not about that. It's about going where you're wanted. It's about, really giving a lot of consideration to the school that is showing a tremendous amount of interest in you. Because if a school is showing interest in you, it means they've got a vision for you. They're not just blindly taking somebody in saying, we'll bring them in, you know, if he plays 10 games for us over the course of 4 years, it is what it is. We'll get him out of here and he can go on with his life. We're going to bring you in because there's a vision for you in this program to be successful and help us win baseball games. I believe that is the end of my spiel. Thank you for listening. What's up?
I'm not going to talk about anything like they talked about, although we did do a really good job. Hi, Leslie Fields. I work at Xavier now, and throughout my career I've been at everywhere from Division II to Power 4, although Power 4 is more school. I was at did not have baseball, so it was a terrible time in my life. I will go so fast because so far over. So I do want to talk first Eligibility Center. Just show of hands, is anyone registered with the Eligibility Center already? Okay. Are we freshmen, sophomores, juniors in here? No. Okay. I would say if you're a junior and you're thinking D1, D2, you need to go ahead and register with the Eligibility Center. You cannot go on an official visit or get a scholarship offer officially on paper until you are in the Eligibility Center. Talk to your guidance counselor at your school. They will need to submit your official transcript from school to the Eligibility Center so that they can start evaluating that. The NCAA Eligibility Center, for the older folks in the room, it used to be called the Clearinghouse. It does the same thing now. It just makes sure that every single student athlete that's going D1 or D2 is academically prepared to do so, and it's like a level playing prep level math. You can't take, I don't know, addition your freshman year, and that's not going to be a countable core course. But again, like I see very few transcripts, no matter what school I worked at, where an American student is not meeting those initial eligibility requirements. So do what your guidance counselor says, graduate on time, and you're probably going to be fine. You also only have to have a 2.3 GPA. This is what I'm saying, like it's not a high bar. However, I think the coaches in the room would agree, a 2.3 is not going to get you admitted to every school you want to go to, so aim a lot higher than that. It can also help with academic money. Depending on your school, you can get some academic merit aid the higher your grades are. And then, honestly, coaches, like whether we have 34 guys on the roster or if you're D2 and you can have more than that, they don't want academic headaches. Like if you're really freaking good, they might take a gamble on a guy with a 2.5, but otherwise, no. Like they want to make sure that they can trust that you're taking care of what you're doing in the classroom, so that they don't have to bother you about it, and they can pretty much just focus on baseball. So keep the grades high. That's super important, regardless of that the NCAA says you just need a 2.3. That's not really real world. Coaches are going to be looking for a lot higher than that. Let's see, there was something else with the Eligibility Center. They're also going to certify your amateur status. They're just making sure that you have not professionalized yourself in any way. Doesn't happen a lot, again, with American baseball players, but be sure that if you're speaking to an agent that you don't sign anything with him, even you don't agree to do anything with him beyond college ball, even verbally. Anything like that can impact your eligibility a little bit. I actually had a baseball player at a previous school. He was from Canada. He was speaking with an agent, and the agent actually advised him to go to college. He broke down on a piece of paper, here's what I think your signing bonus will be, here's what your scholarship will be worth, and the scholarship was worth more in this student's case. Because the kid received like a piece of paper with that evaluation on it from the agent, the NCAA said, you received a benefit from an agent. So he was not like out of college baseball forever, but he did have to sit out 5. I negotiated it down to 5 games, and he was a pitcher, so it was really only 1, so it was fine. But that's the kind of thing, just keep that in mind. Like that's kind of an extreme example, but if you do speak to an agent, whether it's while you're still in high school or even in college, you are allowed to speak to them. You cannot receive anything from them. Even if you meet them for lunch, you got to pay for your own lunch. Any kind of benefit that you receive from them would impact your eligibility negatively. These guys have referred to these roster limits and stuff quite a bit. Jordan's right that we don't really know. Conversations are being had behind a lot of closed doors that those of us who are outside the Power Four don't have the answers to. But even people who are in the Power Four don't know yet either. What we're hearing though is that yes, the 34 will be in effect for next year. That there's not going to be a grace period. It's just happening. We're hearing there will not be like you can't have like a JV squad or a practice squad or anything like that. It's going to be 34. The thing that does seem to be up in the air is that going to be first day of school, or is that going to be, we've heard December 1st as a date. I don't know how these guys feel. I don't like it. It sucks. Like we have 40 guys on our roster at Xavier right now. Like that math, that doesn't jive. We signed the smallest class we've ever signed because we had to. We only signed 5 incoming freshmen. Usually it's double that. And so it sucks. It's not the NCAA's rule. It's not our rule. It was lawsuits that decided this for us, and it's just put guys in a really crappy position. But even if you say you have until December 1st to make that decision, now you're going to have guys who have gone to school for a semester and now they have to find a place to go in the middle of the school year. It's terrible. Right now, the NCAA has a ban on mid-year transfers in baseball. We have not heard anything that rule would change. So imagine you get cut on December 1st of 2025 and you have to transfer at mid-year. In Division I anyway, you can't play until the next fall. So I don't know. I think it's painful. They should just rip the Band-Aid off and do it now. I think I'll stop there because these guys are right. I think the Q&A is probably really important, but line them up.
Coaches, and they spend a ton of time as is. You know, everyone's driving and has kids of their own and things like that. So I really do appreciate, you know, all of you for taking your time, and appreciate for everybody for attending. So hopefully it was helpful. Like I said, if you have any follow-up questions, anything like that, just shoot me an email. And thanks again. All right.